for all those who are watching, not on this Zoom call, but through Facebook or YouTube. And this is our weekly Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time, time to really gather and focus inward, be able to have a few thoughts about spiritual practice, about how to turn our attention to what's real, and to be able to be a little bit deeper in our moment. So this week's parsha is the famous story of Jacob having his dream of the ladder of angels going to and fro. And there's so much about the story, about the place of Jacob having this dream and ladder, and what actually happens with him. If you want to hear more about it, you can. There's a Devar Torah that I'll be giving in the Saturday morning service, and if you want to watch it on video, it will be posted probably tomorrow to hear a little bit more. But just for our purposes, this morning, we're just going to talk about the dream itself and this image of angels running and returning, Ratzov Vishov, and this movement of moving out, moving up, kind of towards heaven, which you can say is that movement towards expansiveness, towards greater consciousness, towards what the Hasidic masters call mochin dik gadlut, great mind, great consciousness, is part of the cycle of our own spiritual growth, has that. And then the angels returning, coming back down to earth, is also can be symbolized to that movement towards mochin dikatnut, or small mind, or more contracted consciousness. And a lot of the time, in the way that some of us, think about spiritual life, is we think about it as just the movement towards greater consciousness. It's all about getting high. And certainly, at different points in our life, that might be what our focus has been. But a more mature perspective on spiritual life is that there is a natural movement towards great consciousness and towards contracted consciousness. And that's not something that we can make not happen. It's just the fabric of reality, that Jacob's dream of these angels going up and down is just a description of reality, a description of how human consciousness expands and contracts with the ebb and flow. And we notice that this movement of expansion and contraction is found everywhere in life. It's found in galaxies and universes. It's found is close to our own breath. Just the breathing in, the expanding of the air, the breathing out. We can look at it in how the pulls of gravity in the ocean, how the tide comes in and it pulls out, and it comes in and it pulls out. And it's just how it is. And so the question for us is, are we able to be present with and awake to that movement of expansion and contraction? And, it's easy also to say, when we're in the middle of that expanded place, to when we know that we're gonna exhale, we know that things are gonna come back, and we might come back into a more stressed perspective, is the willingness to not have to try to hold on, to not be getting upset or bent out of shape when the contraction happens, but instead to open to it, to be awake to it, to be able to be present with the divine energy and aliveness that's even in that movement of contraction, because we know that it's going to expand again, that those angels continue to run up and down. The other piece of this awareness, obviously, that is really important is the moment of contraction. That's usually what we don't like. We don't, it's no fun to feel caught in our own kind of prison of our mind, of whatever our thought and whatever our perspective is, but to also be able to, in that moment that we are aware, to be able to say to ourselves, it will expand again. How can I be here in this contraction? How can I be open to where God is right here in this? And in that moment, we are able to let it expand again. There's a central concept, beautiful, important concept in Chassidut, in our Hasidic spiritual tradition, which has a term. It's called aliyah. No, it's called Yerida Sorech Aliyah, the descent for the sake of the ascent. The descent for the sake of the ascent. Yerida Sorech Aliyah. And it's really this piece is that in order for us to go higher, in order for us to go to greater consciousness, we have to go down. We have to go down. Why do we have to go down? We have to go down because there is the very experience of going down is our attention being directed into places in ourself that we have not yet made aware. Places in ourselves that may be unconscious, places in ourselves that we haven't wanted to deal with. Whatever those are, it's almost as if kind of the visualization that I have is, we're walking around in our lives and we're seeing our whole world through these filters, almost like a window that has all kinds of stuff on the glass. And our filters are what contributes to our filters is everything, our upbringing, our past experiences, all of those things that we view the world in a certain way. And more than anything, we want to be aware of what those filters are and be able to make them more transparent so that they don't actually obscure what we're seeing, but we're able to see the real picture through it and through the filters. But that process of being able to recognize what our filters are, there's a descent that's required. We need to be able to, with awareness, not with unconsciousness, but awareness, be able to descend. And a lot of the times life just does this for us. You don't really have to, going into therapy and actively putting our attention in is always a great, useful thing with a great therapist. But most of the time life is gonna push you right into that descent, whatever it is. There's no shortage of opportunities for us to react. And the question is in that moment, can we be able to go with it? To instead of resist it, but go with it and say, what do I have to learn here? What needs to be made conscious? Because I know that the descent is for the sake of the ascent, that I'm going down in here so that I can open up even greater. I mean, just even having that frame of that idea is so empowering if you take it seriously, because it means you're willing to give yourself. It helps you know that you're going to emerge from the other side, and it's necessary. So how do I open in that moment? So we'll get to practice this a little bit. I want you to go ahead and get into a comfortable position to sit for some time, for some silence. And we'll begin with a nigun, a melody. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai dai yai 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 dai dai. Ya da da, ya da da. 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 Just begin by becoming aware of your body and space, the contact of your bottom and the chair, the bottom of your feet contacting the floor, the ground, the distance between the bottom of your feet, the shape of your legs all the way to your hip, aware of the distance between the bottom of your spine and the top of your head, the way the arms hang out of the shoulder blades and the resting place of the hands. And as you're aware of the outline of your body in space, the full length of your body, the place where your body ends and the rest of the air and the world begins, become aware of the movement of breath, noticing where the air enters your nostrils or your mouth, noticing the expansion, the way the chest or the belly expands to make room for the inhale. That moment where the inhale reaches its maximum length and switches over to an exhale, following the air as it leaves the body. And then noticing where the exhale reaches its maximum length and switches over to an inhale, beginning the cycle again. Being aware of how your entire body breathes with the cycle of the inhale and the exhale. And we don't control the breath. It's just paying attention to the natural movement and cycle of inhale and exhale. Noticing how we make no effort at all to make the breath happen. It happens on its own. Angels running and returning. A movement that is inherent to our very aliveness. The word for breath, nishima, in Hebrew has the same root as the word for soul, nishama. There's something about this movement of breath in and out of the body that is connected to this mystery that we call soul, this essence of who we are. Just paying attention to every part of the movement of breath, paying attention to where the air enters the nostrils or the mouth. Follow its passage in through your nose or through your trachea, or noticing the expansion of chest and belly with the inhale, and then feeling the switch over to an exhale all by itself. Following the air out, noticing the body contracting all by itself. We could even say that we are being breathed. That this movement, that this experience of breath comes from beyond our own choice, our own control. We can alter the movement of breath. We can stop it, we can slow it, we can speed it up, but we can't get rid of it. Let yourself be breathed. It's like riding a wave. It's what it means in the most essential way to go with the flow, to go with the flow of the breath, of the body. And as you are aware of the flow of the breath, the expansion, the contraction, notice that that flow, that rising, that falling is an object in your awareness. That you can also be aware of the space that is around the breath. At the same time that you're aware of the movement of breath, pay attention to the space around it. Notice how that space around the breath extends infinitely in every direction. So that there is awareness of infinite space with the movement of breath floating in the middle. The rising and the falling. And the infinite space that surrounds. Let your awareness expand to reach towards that infinite space in all directions. You can even be aware that there isn't even really a reaching, that your very awareness itself is that infinite space. So it's just a recognizing. Anything else that appears in your awareness in addition to the breath, whether it's sounds or body sensations or thoughts, let those just appear and disappear within that infinite space. They just float. And as you continue to open to and recognize that infinite space in all directions, that is the ground of all the objects in your mind, recognize that the space itself is filled with life, with energy. It's alive, it's vibrant. It's not empty, but it's present. I'm going to be quiet now for a period of time. And I invite you to keep your awareness anchored with that expansion and contraction of breath, but present to the infinite space that surrounds it in all directions, that is the ground of it. That infinite space that holds all objects that appear in your awareness. And so the attention over and over again is about being with the breath and the space that surrounds. Yai dai dai, 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 yai dai dai. Yai dai dai, 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 yai dai dai. Yai dai dai, yai dai dai. Thank you, everybody, for that beautiful space together. Any comments or questions or observations about the meditation, about the expansion, the contraction, about this idea of Yerida Tzorech Aliyah, of descent for the sake of the ascent? How is all of this sitting with you this morning? Or anything else?
I have a comment, Rabbi.
Yes, Audrey.
I've been walking with some gals over this pandemic period, and when you talked about learning from the closing of the mind, one of them talked about we had a difference of opinion with the mask wearing, that people should be able to just decide for themselves, blah, blah, blah. And I started noticing my mind closing up to what she was saying and not being open. And so when I came home last night and thought about it, wrote about it, it was all about wanting someone to think like I did. You know, I learned from that experience. I didn't have to get into it with somebody, but I got to see it's about me, and my mind was closing up. As you were saying that, it like what I wrote last night, they went together. Because then I'm not opening to being with that person totally when I'm too focused on they should be thinking like me or whatever. So that's what I got out of part of it. I got a lot out of it, but that was more about personal.
Beautiful. And did you notice as you were reflecting more afterwards on that movement of closing of mind, that why you had the need in that moment for them to think like you did?
It's not an anomaly. I know from that's what I can do, but that's where I realize it's about me and not my thinking is, old stuff. No, because I wasn't aware that that's why I did it until I got home. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's incredible. I mean, the amount of awareness that you're expressing to notice about that, to reflect upon it, to be able to see that it doesn't have to be that way. You know, I don't know if this is for you. I know that sometimes the desire or the need that I might have for somebody to think like me, that there could be a motivation of that. It helps me feel more safe. And I don't know if it's in the question of the mask wearing, but certainly with this pandemic, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety around getting sick and around all of this. And if you hear a perspective from somebody that seems to say, I'm not gonna, we don't really need to wear masks so much. Does that make you feel more anxious? Does it make you feel more anxious of like, maybe I'm going to get more sick if you think that way, if others think that way, if all those pieces? And so immediately the contraction happens, and I don't want to hear anymore what's behind your thinking, because I'm protecting, this is the protecting. So it's whatever it is for each one of us, it's a really worthwhile place to explore why is it important for us that other people think the way that we do on any given particular issue. And it's not to judge our reasons for it at all, just to notice what's there. Thank you, Audrey. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sure. Sherry, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm just listening today.
Good.
Well, this is Maury. I got a little bit thrown off by who was just speaking? Was that Norma?
No, it was Audrey.
Audrey. I got a little bit thrown off by my rage toward people who I consider to be responsible for what we're going through right now. So I have to set that aside. And I was thinking about what you were talking about, Rabbi, the expansion, contraction of consciousness, and how maturity, and I'll have to call it old age, is one positive in this respect, because I mean, you can't control, of course, life makes, things happen you don't have any control over, but in terms of mindset, that knowledge that this too shall pass, that I will be, I will feel better, I will change, I will make changes, is really comes from a life experience. I remember being a teenager, young adulter, and I think for all of us, feeling like my peers, rejection or criticizing it was the end of the world. There are teenagers who want to die because they don't know that this will get better. Yeah. And it's only life experience, that's what it is, really. I think that brings that along.
Absolutely. It is life experience. And what I'll say is I think we've noticed also that where life experience can help us be able to, realize that things come and go and pass, that no matter what age we are still, there are always new challenges that we've never experienced before, that sometimes we have to remember those same, it's like I can watch kid number 2 and kid number 3 do the same thing, and I know that it's going to pass, and I know that it's kind of normal. But then what happens, I'm speaking personally, then what happens when I suddenly hit, my first kid's teenage experience, and maybe something is happening that I haven't looked at the literature for, or I haven't heard from somebody else, or I haven't had whatever, and I don't actually know, do I need to step in here? Do I need to step back here? Do I need to kind of move forward? What's going to come and go? And so each new experience, at no matter what age we are, challenges us in this way to be able to come back to that sense of expansion, contraction. And I think, what I find is that this practice that we did just this morning of, as we're paying attention to the breath, also noticing the space that holds the breath, also noticing the space around it, noticing even very awareness itself. The more that we can get used to paying attention to that place of spaciousness that's around whatever is the rising and falling. And here, the breath is a nice, easy, neutral, expansion, contraction to watch. And we know that things happen in our lives that are more charged. There are contractions that have all kinds of stories with it that can feel, it's hard to remember that this too shall pass. It really feels like it in the middle. But without knowing what the future is, just beginning to train ourselves to pay attention to the space that is surrounding whatever it is, and be able to kind of ground our awareness that it isn't all about the contraction in the moment, that there is a space that holds it, allows us to really then see the contraction for what it is, which is a movement that will then expand and that will then contract. So it's like paying attention to not just the object of our awareness, but the ground that it arises in.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Intimate relationships are like that too.
Same words.
Well, just that after a while, I've been married for a long time. After a while, I can remember that I just have to wait. Things will get, I usually don't wait for them to get worse. I usually am waiting for them to get better, but I know from past experience of being in this relationship that it will change.
Yeah.
I don't really have to do anything to make it change.
Yeah. Sometimes
You know,
people,
I just have to be patient.
yeah, right. Sometimes people just need space and time, and not everything has to be fixed right away, but yeah, beautiful.
Or at all.
Or at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You know, I have having my descent over the week and then ascending. This was a very appropriate discussion today for my past week. I don't know if I should make an analogy, but the two different types of meditation I've experienced in my life, which is where you go with your thoughts and you explore them as your mind brings things up, versus what we're doing, where you go back to your breath as the mind and you get back, which is what I've been doing, since we've been all working together. So the ascent and the descent, what I tend to do as I go into a descent is to get off the freeway. I instead of going with it, and I know, Dennis, but that's just the way I'm thinking about it. So when we're meditating, we come back to being mindful, to being in the present, to listen, to thinking and feeling our breath. But yet when we go into a descent, we go with that. We don't, so it's a different mental process, it seems to me. Am I analyzing this correctly? It just seems like a different, I don't know.
It's really a great thing you're bringing up, Ellen. And the way that I'm hearing what you're saying is, when we're in the middle of, what I hear is when you're saying, when we're in the middle of a contracted space, the descent or whatever it is, what's going to be, how do we want to be with that?
Right.
Do we get off the freeway, as you said, like, meaning, do we just not pay attention to the contractedness there? And that, can be, and we can do that in a lot of ways. Here we're talking about, you can do it of, bringing your attention back to the breath, but it also could be, you can distract yourself with something else, put your attention somewhere else, and not be present for as much as possible of what's happening in the contraction. Or do we go with, do we be with, experience with, whatever it's happening? And I think that, what it's both and it's neither. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is, I don't think that any kind of not putting our attention where our mind is wanting to go will lead us to any kind of insight. Meaning that the descent for the sake of the ascent means that the descent is necessary. It's necessary. It's not like a fly buzzing on us that we're trying to get rid of. There's something real that's happening in our own being, in our own psyche, that's bringing us down to the descent. And if we want to be able to grow, develop more capacity, more understanding, more wisdom, we need to be able to be with that descent. But we don't want to be lost in the descent, right? So the question is I'll use that because it's all really the same thing. I just kind of sometimes give different meditative techniques or images to do the same thing. When we talk about the divine symphony, right? Let's say that there's something in our moment that's not comfortable. Let's call that the descent in whatever it is. There's some contraction, and that can be a physical thing. It can be something emotionally that's just not feeling right, whatever it is. It could be a thought that is driving us crazy. The practice in the divine symphony is not to get rid of or not pay attention to whatever that is. It's to see and welcome whatever that piece is as just one instrument in the whole orchestra. See, our problem is that our whole attention wants to just focus on that instrument and not listen to any of the other instruments that's happening. And there's a reason why our attention is contracting that. There's something that's trying to be worked out, healed, brought towards wholeness. We have this drive towards wholeness that is always happening. So we don't want to push, we still want to listen. We still want that instrument to be part of the symphony. But in order for that instrument to really sing, for us to really hear the music in it, and not just the in it, we got to hear the other instruments too. We got to be present to all of it. So we're aware of breath. And in this case too, instead of the direction being, okay, pay attention to the whole totality of your experience as everything being an instrument in the symphony, here we're just making it a little more binary. There's the object in your awareness, and there's the space between it, around it. So that space in the divine symphony is not only it's the very orchestra hall, let's say. It's the concert hall that all the instruments are happening. It's all of that, and saying, don't just pay attention to the music, also pay attention to the space that's holding the music here. And so in this too, we're wanting to pay attention to the space. And the reason why we pay attention to space, not instead of the place where our attention is being pulled, but in addition to, we want to experience, is because that space allows us to be with that contraction, that descent, without getting lost in it, right? Without getting lost in it. And that's the key. In order for the descent to actually have fruit, that's going to birth some kind of insight or some kinds of whatever, we can't get lost in it. We have to be with it, but we have to be with it with those qualities of presence, open-heartedness, openness. And so all of these different meditative qualities are, how do we start to bring those qualities, that kind of openness to those moments. Is that helpful at all?
It is. I think symphony for me personally works better than I'm good with that one.
Yeah.
And also, just as an aside, because I work with music, and I work with a score in front of me, that I'm very much into the rests of the music.
Yes.
Not just the music itself. So those rests are so very important in music. And when I'm working with other people, I do bring that up many times when it's appropriate. But the rest also, that the rest will end also, and it'll go back into the symphony. So you have those different facets of music. I mean,
that's beautiful, and that's wonderful. And those rests, I love that, because music doesn't happen without the space between.
right.
That space between and those rests, that's what we're talking about with the space that holds it. Because the truth is that space that we get to experience, the silence that we experience in the rest, is actually present even when the instruments are playing. It's just the instruments stop, and then we're able to hear the rest more. So, and I would imagine, and that that in a sense, a musician or somebody who's jamming or playing or going ahead, right, is already in some even unconscious way is present with the silence underneath the music, because how would they know where to stop in a moment to give a break for a certain kind of expression? There has to, like, they have to be present to that possibility of those breaks and those rests, even as the music is, even as they're jamming. So
Which is the breath, which is
Yeah.
the breath, the rest.
beautiful. Oh, I love it. Thank you. Okay, well, we need to conclude, but great to be with folks. Great to learn and share and meditate together. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Happy-
good week,